In this video, we're going to look at how to install Project Server 2010 on a farm with a single application server. Now, if you have more than one application server, the process is actually a little bit different, and we have a separate video to cover that. So in this case, we're just going to look at a single application server. Now, before you get started installing Project Server, you of course want to make sure that you have your Sharepoint server farm already installed and set up. And you can see here we're in SharePoint Central Administration, so our farm is up and running. Before you start the process of installing Project Server, if you haven't restarted the application servers since you installed SharePoint Server, you should restart the application servers in your farm. And I've actually already done that, so I'm going to proceed along here. So I'm just going to go ahead and close out Central Admin. And I have my Project Server DVD in the DVD drive. So I'm going to find my DVD drive. And then I'm going to double click on default.hta. And that will open the splash screen. And we want to go to Install Project Server. Software prerequisites were already taken care of when we deployed our SharePoint server farm, so we don't need to worry about that. So I will click on Install Project Server. And I'll type my product key. And I'll click Continue. Accept the licensing agreement. And since SharePoint Server is already installed, we don't need to configure an install location. We can just click Install Now. And we'll wait a minute while it installs the software. Now, the software has been copied to our hard disk. And in order to integrate it with SharePoint Server, we do need to run the SharePoint Products and Technologies Configuration Wizard. And this checkbox is selected by default, so I'll just leave it that way, and I'll click Close. And we'll go through the wizard. And this is just telling us it's going to restart a few services. Now it's going to ask a couple of questions here. One of them is, do we want to disconnect from the farm? And of course we don't want to do that. We want to stay on the farm. So I'll click Next. And it will also ask if we want to stop hosting the Central Administration website. And of course we don't want to do that, so we'll leave that as the default as well. And click Next. And click Next one more time, and it will configure the system. And there it says our configuration is successful, so I will click Finish. And it's going to launch the Central Administration website for me once again. And I'm going to go up to the Central Admin homepage. There's one more thing that we need to do to integrate Project Server with SharePoint Server. And that is we need to refresh the list of installed products in SharePoint Server, and we need to use a Windows PowerShell commandlet to do this. So I'm going to go down to Start, All Programs, Microsoft SharePoint 2010 Products, and then I'm going to actually right-click on SharePoint 2010 Management Shell, and I'm going to choose Run as Administrator. And the commandlet that I want to use is set sp farm config -installed products refresh. And there I've executed the commandlet. So I can go ahead and close the Windows PowerShell window here. And that'll take us back to our Central Administration homepage. And if we take a look under Manage Services on Server here under System Settings, now if I scroll down here, you'll see we have the Project Application Service and also the Performance Point service, which we will also need for configuring Project Server. And it shows that both of these are stopped, and we do need to start these, so I'm just going to click Start next to each one. And you can see now Performance Point Service and Project Application Service are both started. So I'm going to scroll back up. go back to Central Administration homepage. And then next we want to go to Manage Service Applications under Application Management. So I'll click here, and you can see we've got a list of the service applications on this server. And it's not a very long list in my case because I just set up a new farm. But if you have a Sharepoint server farm with a bunch of services running on it, you may see them listed here. So the next thing that we want to do is to create service applications for both Performance Point and Project Server. And to do that, I'll go up to New, and we'll start with Performance Point. I'll click on Performance Point Service Application, and I'm just going to call it Performance Point. And I'll add it to the farm's default proxy list, and then scroll down. And we'll need an application pool. So I'm just going to call it Performance Point Pool. And then we also need a managed account to run the application pool. Now in this case, I'm just going to leave it set to my farm admin account, and that's fine. If your Sharepoint administrator has previously set up a managed account for running application pools, then you'll want to go ahead and use that account here. So I will click Create. And then we can see it has successfully created the service application, so I will click OK. And you can see it's now listed here in the list. Now next, of course, we want to do the Project Server service application. So again, under New, I will choose Project Server service application. And I'll give it a name. I'll just call it Project Server. And just like with Performance Point, we also need an application pool. I'll call that Project Server Pool. And of course, as with any of these, if you have naming conventions within your organization for application pools or service applications, you'll want to go ahead and follow those. And again, I'm just going to leave Farm Admin as my managed account to run the application pool. If you have a specific one for your Sharepoint farm, go ahead and pick that and click OK. And you can see Project Server is, of course, now listed in our list of service applications. And if I go up to New, you'll see there are quite a few different service applications available, and both Excel services and Secure Store Service we will use with Project Server when we configure reporting, but we'll be covering reporting configuration in another video, so I'm just going to leave this be for the moment. And you see if I click on my service application here, you'll see I now have a link to Create Project Web Access Site. And that would be the next logical step in our configuration, and we'll be covering that in a separate video.